Welcome to the Bring It On Home podcast. I'm Frankie V, former Sydney and London resident, now living in Nashville, Tennessee. This podcast features interviews with the various characters I come across in my travels through the music heartland of the American South. What would it be like to be a young guitarist in Nashville now, some 60-odd years since a lot of the guitar giants that graced the stages and played the studios of this town set the template for musicians around the world to follow? My next guest, Anthony Castagna from California, who now lives in Nashville, can maybe answer that question. He's inspired by the more retro side of the music scene. I hope you sit back and enjoy the show. We start with Anthony playing some guitar.
I came to Nashville in 2016, in the late 2016, to go to Belmont to study guitar performance, where they were teaching me how to perform on the guitar, which was something I'd already been learning how to do for 10, 12 years before that. I went to an arts high school where we had conservatories and we had shows every year, and when I went to Belmont, I just felt like I was doing the same thing. So I only lasted there about 2 semesters, and then I dropped out. And
What's that look like? Or how does it, like, when you say performing and stuff, short of technique, like, how granular do they go? Just out of interest, you know?
It was a performance degree was what I was getting, but there wasn't much performing going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think the requirements, I have a lot of friends that are, went to the program and are still finishing it up. Actually, next semester would have been my graduating semester.
Oh my God, time flies.
Yeah. And so basically it was just a lot of technique and, come into class and learn this song and play it in front of the class. But when you think of performance, you don't think of that. You think of like, oh, I'm going to be on stage playing with musicians, but they only required you to do like 1, maybe 2 performances a semester. And at that, they were just like, they were more focused on how your playing ability was and not what kind of show you put into it, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was curious, where they taught you how to do a show.
Yeah, well, that I don't know. I've always tried to be entertaining on stage to a certain extent. I hate going to a show and seeing a guitar player just stand there like a statue for, 2 hours.
Even if they're in the pocket like Bill Wyman and the Rolling Stones?
I mean, yeah, but Keith
Different
Richards
being a
is
lead, yeah,
rocking,
right.
and
of course,
he's not the best guitar player you ever heard, but he's entertaining. And, the same goes for... But it's a different, it's a different level of performing when you can supersede your instrument and just move into a purely entertaining zone, I guess.
Is that the end game?
I don't know if that's the end game,
But to be zen with your instrument so that you can just feel what you're doing, right?
That'd be a good goal to have for sure. I mean, you can be like Bill Frisell or some of those other jazz guitar players, Wes Montgomery, those people where it's just like, you just watch them and it's something about them. Like Bill Frisell doesn't play a million notes, and he doesn't, often play what a jazz guitar player, I'm using air quotes, jazz guitar player would play, but something about his phrasing and the way he is, it's perfect for what it is. And Wes Montgomery and all Joe Pass, all the classics. But then you look at people like Keith Richards or people like, I don't know, someone who is not up to the level of a technically proficient master of the guitar, but they put on a great show and they're still just as entertaining to watch. Like for me, I can watch Keith Richards all day, and I can watch Wes Montgomery all day.
So, but okay, let's go back to a step. The thing I like about you is I think you're like me in that you probably used Belmont as an excuse to come to Nashville because you were trying to imbibe the spirit of this state or this place, right?
Well,
you're kind of half curious,
yeah.
Like what's in there, what's out there,
I had a teacher in high school tell me that I needed to go to Nashville, and then I was looking at it and I thought Belmont was the school to go to because nowadays every high school emphasizes that you have to go to college to get a good job so you can make money and be successful. Well, I wanted to move to Nashville, A, because BR549, and B, because of country music, which I loved, and C, rockabilly music, which I also loved. And then, I got here, and it was definitely a different vibe. You think Broadway, and I had been listening to a lot of those BR549 live records from Roberts and stuff. You think, oh, they're going to be playing classic country music down here. It's going to be great. Then you go down to the second filler or whatever, and people are playing AC/DC and Led Zeppelin, and it's like, what is this doing on Lower Broadway? But I'm glad that Roberts has still kind of remained classic country.
I mean, you're interesting because you're one of the talented artists that's playing around, but you're also quite young compared to everyone else that's here. So that's like a really unique perspective to have on everything going on, because I feel like, do you feel maybe others might feel more pressure where you've got more time to work on something? And do you workshopping, what do you guys call it, woodchucking or whatever?
Going to the woodshed?
Yeah, like are you still working yourself out? You trying to learn? Are you in that phase? Like what's that look like for you? Like coming here, you think you know a bunch of stuff, you come here, you're surrounded by really talented people. Then what's that look like as a young person? Let's say you're talking to the next Anthony Castagna.
I don't know, but so when I came here, it was definitely like, I think it's anyone when they go to college, you're like, oh, I've got some licks under my belt, I think I can make my way. And the first night you're on Broadway and you see a guitar player just like shredding, and you think to yourself, I need to go home and practice. I need to get my guitar out. I need to stay at home for 5 weeks and just work on my, my licks and my everything. And
so it makes you want to work harder. That's one thing.
Seeing another guitar player play better than you definitely makes you want to work harder, so that you can say, like, I can play what that guy's playing, or I can play something of equivalent difficulty to it. We've all been there where we see someone doing something, like, we think that we can do something okay, and then someone comes along and they do it 8 times better than you could ever hope to do it. And that's just like, it gets your competitive spirit going, and you're like, I need to go home and work on this. And that's definitely where I was when I came here. I thought, oh yeah, I'm gonna play live. I can definitely hang. And then I saw some guitar players in here, and I was like, I need to work on this. Because I played in some rockabilly bands in California before I came out. But, I'd never played a lot of country music. And when I came out here, I'm like, I need to learn more country licks and more country guitar stuff. And so I worked on that, and I've been working on that. But I never want to say that I've stopped learning anything, because you're always learning. Even the oldest guitar player can probably tell you they're still learning something.
So what's interesting is you seem like you're talking more about technique rather than feel.
Well, no,
or like individual guitar, like the subtleties of someone's individual playing and things like that. Because there's a lot of really amazing technique.
Yeah.
But the distinctive. To have your own distinctive sound and things like that. I mean,
yeah. All right, you want to talk about feel? We can talk about feel. There's a lot of great guitar players out there, and it kind of harkens back to, you don't have to be the best, but you can certainly have a certain feel or a certain presence on the guitar. And like Chuck Mead is always like that for me. He'll say it himself. I've heard him say it. He's not a lead guitar player, but he plays lead guitar in his band, in the Deadend Boys and in BR549. And every time I watch him play, it's always, I'm just enthralled in whatever he's playing, just to see what he's going to play with his skill level to add to that, that sound that he gets with his band. And their last record was great. And great. Chuck's guitar playing is...
That was recorded in
Memphis.
Philip's recording studio.
Yeah. Sounds great. It's killer on tape. You can hear the hum in the background.
No, I agree. I've heard even some anecdotes from that show. I think Mark Miller was telling me that the guy that records in Sun, he's like quite famous. I think he may have recorded, he's won a Grammy or something. He's holding the fort up down in Memphis anyway in that kind of capacity. But they had some new amp or something, and I think someone blew it. I think Chuck blew it. And
that's right.
And they were excited about blowing it and capturing it on tape. It's that old, mistakes are good. They make it.
Well, Mark was telling me when they were recording that they wanted, I forgot what song it was, but they told Mark to play like he was drunk, and that's why at the end of that one song, Mark says, "Was that drunk enough?" I don't remember which song it was now.
Oh, man. That's kind of what you want to hear out of studios, right? That creativity.
Yeah, well, that's just that's the energy in that record is so good, too, because they... those guys all know each other and they played together. But all the new songs, they brought the same energy from their live show into the recording studio. And it sounds like a live record, even though they might have overdubbed something.
Go to Memphis.
Go to Memphis to Phillips Recording.
Alive. Memphis is still alive in the recording front.
That seems to be the next place to be right now.
Hallelujah. And again, another town that goes through cyclical things. So hopefully with the musicians and stuff going there, then it'll have its own kind of revival. Because it's a shame if you're an enthusiast like me and you to go there and it's like, where's the rockabilly?
Yeah, I played there with Jane Rose, who I play with every time I can. And we were at some store and the woman was talking to us and she's like, "Oh, we haven't had rockabillys here in a long time." And I was like, I'm surprised.
Yeah, and it's not even like, it's not like you want a rockabilly scene in Memphis, but you want to think there's some kind of continuity in their music. But
something paying homage to.
Right. And it probably is there, but it'll come and go. But yeah. Anyway, that's like a whole rabbit hole right there, right? So
we'll have to go down to Hernando's Hideaway sometime.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited about that. I mean, this whole place is. I mean, tell me how you feel about this. But I know how I feel. But what do you feel about living in? What inspires you about living here?
About living in Nashville,
in Tennessee. Yeah.
Oh, well, there's all this history down here in Nashville. I think about it every time I live down in Hillsborough Village, and so every time I have to go downtown or something, I'll end up taking Music Row downtown, and I just think every time I'm driving down there, like, wow, it's crazy to think, like 70 years ago, Hank Garland could have been crossing the street here to go from...
Hank Williams lived there.
Yeah, Hank Williams lived there, but like to think like, oh, there's the Quonset Hut, there's RCA Studio B, there's Ocean Way and all these great studios, and I've been honored to be able to have recorded at most of those studios, and it's
amazing in itself.
Yeah, it's unreal when you walk into the Quonset Hut and plug your amp in and think, this is where Patsy Cline recorded Walking After Midnight, and this is where Johnny Cash recorded Bob Dylan. All these great musicians, Roy Orbison. It's insane just to sit in there with this giant room around you. And I'm glad that they saved it because it was offices for a long time.
And where's that one?
Quonset Hut. Mm-hmm. It's on 17th, kind of toward the end, toward the Circle, literally a block away from RCA Studio B. Mm-hmm. They had to build them close together to make it easy for people to walk to them so they can record.
Because there's no footpaths in Nashville.
No, they never are. But yeah, the Quonset Hut, for those of you who don't know, is the second location of Owen Bradley's recording studio. The first location was a house in front of it where they chopped the floor out and everyone recorded in the basement, but they had since the first floor was cut out, they had the giant ceiling which reverbed and echoed, and that's where they recorded Bebopalula and Race with the Devil, and a bunch of other recordings. There's good photos of everyone down in the basement, and you can see the line from where the floor used to be above their heads. And just like...
That's amazing.
Yeah. 8 people sitting in a room with, mics facing every which way. And they filled it in and put offices in front where it would have been, I guess. and they even cover the Quonset hut now. So you can drive by it, but you won't be able to see the original dome shape of the Quonset hut from the road.
Wow, but if you go in,
it's still the same structure, still the same dome, and you can see it from the back too. You can actually see the top. I've been on top of the roof of the Quonset hut
because
I've got connections on the inside, and there's a door that goes up to the roof, and you can stand up there and see the whole length of the Quonset hut roof. And
you take photos of this stuff?
Yeah, I've got some photos of it I can show you.
And so what's it like? Okay, so recording studios, talented musicians, and does this how does it affect you day to day? Inspires you, like the weight of history on the back? What?
Like going to the studios or recording
like playing them? Like what's that like?
It's a unreal feeling. I mean, it'd be like, I mean, I've never been able to do either of these, but it would be like, you know, as religious of an experience as going and playing the Ryman, or, you know, if you're Catholic, going to the Vatican, it's kind of like the same thing, or going to, you know, Israel and Jerusalem to see all those biblical sites if you're a real religious student.
And having a moment. I suppose, like, as a rockabilly going to Sun Records, I mean,
that's also a very emotional moment. Right? Yeah. And going to these, if you like country music and all that stuff, going to these studios where it's like ground zero, where it all pretty much went down.
More than country, though.
Well, country for sure.
Rock and roll.
I like country music
R&B.
too.
Black R&B, right? We're on Jefferson. This street, like, you know, Jimmy lived on this street.
I need to go to the museum.
Yeah, here. Well, whenever it's open. I haven't seen it open, but yeah, this street's the Chitlin Circuit.
That's true. And, well, Printer's Alley also.
Right.
It's part of that. And I play there every week. I'm glad to play there. It's cool that it's Printer's Alley. When I first moved here, there wasn't much going on. There was Bourbon Street, and I think that was pretty much it. And then Skulls opened up, and now they've got 2 other clubs down there, and that hot dog stand, and a karaoke bar. And I was just there last night, and the whole Printer's Alley was just blocked with people. It was cool to see it happen, and they still have some of those old signs up from the Climax Saloon and whatever that other one is.
Do you think, like, do people tip better too downtown now? Like, do you feel that's changed?
I think so I haven't played on Broadway. Well, I have. Sorry. I played on Broadway recently, and Printer's Alley, I feel like it's better tips than Broadway does.
Because it's near all the posh hotels now, I guess.
That's probably true. I mean, when you think about it, people leaving those expensive hotels are more likely to see Printer's Alley and go there first. So.
And drop their loose cash.
Yeah, but it's not about the tips that much. We get a lot of the bars in Printer's Alley also just pay better rates because I think they respect musicians more than Broadway bars do. And I don't know why that is, but I feel like there's probably a change happening where Broadway people are going to start asking for more money.
Interesting.
Because it's a lot to play 4 hours without a break and, get paid a $50 base pay. I've done it a bunch of times.
No healthcare. You have to pay for parking downtown.
I never pay for parking downtown. I
feel like that's going to be the name of your album or one of your albums.
I never pay for parking
downtown.
But no, this is my
The Blues of Anthony Castagna.
This is my Seinfeld episode. I never pay for parking downtown. God. If I were to just get in my car and drive anywhere, I'd probably drive to Memphis. And I like the feel there. I just wish there were more people there. But now that, of course we talked about all those people moving, bringing stuff in there. What they need to do is put the train back up between Memphis and Nashville.
Don't even get me started on that.
That would be so great. Every musician would be like,
But then they're like, well, what are you going to do when you get to Memphis? Like, how are you going to get around? Memphis is probably easy. It's more of a walking city than Nashville, to be honest.
Yeah.
With the downtown and you could probably get around more on your feet down in Memphis than you could here.
And especially with things like Lyft and Uber now.
And
if you had a train that dropped you off downtown in Memphis, you could get around to your gigs.
You can't. Like, I'm telling you, I reckon there should be a train just for tourists that goes from Memphis through Nashville to Knoxville and up to Bristol. That
Yeah.
could be like a whole tourist thing, but they're like, where these tourists, where are they, and I'm like, well, if you build it, they'll come. So what about like when you're writing stuff, like inspiration for writing? Like what does that look like from a guitarist point of view? Because I know what from a like lyricist or like you're writing songs and stuff, but
Yeah.
how does that work as a guitarist? How do you get inspired to write music?
Um.
Pure music, no words.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've written more instrumental songs than I've written songs with lyrics. I'm not really a lyricist, but I inspiration can just come from anywhere. I often find like 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. is my golden hour for writing things.
Just when you go back from like a gig,
Yeah,
you're eating some takeaway or probably Cheerios or whatever you guys do, and
it's usually like I get home and then I shower and I'm sitting in my bed and then I'll just be like, I wonder what this would sound like, and I have my guitar right by my bed and I'll grab it and then it's like, oh, okay, and then it just kind of happens. But I have a giant record shelf at my house, and I'm always buying records, and my friends will attest to this. I'm always posting records and stuff that I'm listening to.
Do you play along with records like the old guys, like most of the old, people learned by playing other people's stuff and listening?
Yeah, I used to a lot more than I do now because my record player at home plays the records too fast, and so everything's out of tune. And I don't have a very speed on my record player, which kind of bums me out because I do like playing the records. But I'll play along to stuff on my phone if I have it, or I'll go on YouTube if there's a song I want to learn.
Do you slow it down?
Every now and then I do if it's a hard one. Like I did that for one of the songs on my song list that I sent you, Brian Setzer tune called Intermission off his instrumental record. That's like my favorite Brian Setzer song, and I don't feel like a lot of people know that one. It's such a good guitar song that Setzer wrote, and it took me a couple of years to get around to learning that song because there's so many good licks in it, and I'm still not finished with it, but I might be breaking out at a gig soon.
And that's cool to know. I think people, when they're learning stuff like guitar, you can kind of pick it up and be in a punk band pretty easy. Relatively easy. Even punk can get complicated, but so the patience you need to learn a song, and the fact that it can take a long time, and then you have to keep re-listening to the original song.
Yeah, it can get annoying to other people in your house if you have a roommate. That's for sure. I mean, my roommate's a guitar player, and so I think we understand what when we just hear the same lick over and over again for an hour, like what's going through our mind. But yeah, it's definitely a trying process. Just like with anything, you just got to practice it and get it in your head or in your hands or in your ears. That's when the slow down thing, like YouTube, is a great resource for that, because you can just play it at half speed and it won't pitch shift it or anything. So you can sit there and hear it. It's a little tough sometimes. I know there's better programs for it, but I haven't gotten any of those. YouTube seems to work for me.
Do you think the old timeies guys did that? Like
they did.
Slows everything. Do you think they slowed? Do you think Eric Clapton was slowing Bill Brinzy and all that down?
Paul McCartney. There's that great video on YouTube of Paul McCartney and Carl Perkins backstage at one of his shows in the '80s, and Paul was telling Carl, like, back in the day when we were in Liverpool and we heard someone had a Carl Perkins record, we'd take the bus over to their house and knock on their door and be like, we hear you have a Carl Perkins record. Can we borrow it for the afternoon or whatever? And they'd go home and they'd play it at, like, if it was a 45, they'd play it at 33 just so that, and someone would be writing and someone would be transcribing things, and Paul would say they'd listen to Lend Me Your Comb. He's like, what do you say, comb? Yeah, so, I mean, that's proof enough that those old guys did it, and I imagine A lot of them did, to learn like some of those instrumental songs.
And what about like feeling? Can you learn that from? Do you have to like keep playing back to get the feeling?
I think the more comfortable you get with a song, the more feeling you'll put into it. Like whenever I see someone, on stage, and I've done this before. It's like, oh, I just learned this song today. Let's play it. It's never as good as if you come back and a year later hear them play the song, because they've had that much time to sit with it and it gets comfortable with them. And then they start adding different inflections to it, and they start adding their own spin on it, and they feel it more because it's internalized. They've played it enough to where they don't have to think about it.
It's amazing. Seems like common sense, right?
Yeah.
But it's weird to think of us as like a computer program, and that you're putting it in, and then it just kind of comes out, and then it's coming out literally from this organic thing.
Yeah, you've put the time in, and then it's just there.
What about like natural talent? What do you think about that?
I hate people that have natural talent.
Do you think
I didn't have natural talent.
How many these pitch perfect people have you met? Like,
I know a handful of them, and it's just like, it baffles me. I don't hate people with natural talent. That was a joke, but I'm just envious because I didn't have that when I started on guitar. I started with Smoke on the Water, like everyone does. My parents will tell you the story. 3 6 9 3 6 9 8 for the frets and everything, and then I'd meet people that were like, I've never had a lesson in my life, and then just play like something from ear on piano or on guitar perfectly, and I'm just like, but you always hear stories about those people. It's like they have a certain amount of natural talent when they're learning, and then they think, oh, I'm ahead of everyone, and then eventually everyone else starts to creep up to their level. And then eventually sometimes they get surpassed, and then they're like, oh, maybe it's time I need to learn how to do some stuff, how to play. And
so what got you into guitar as a kid? Like, how old? I think you've told me before. You're quite young, right?
Yeah, I think I was 8 when I got my first guitar.
What year was that? Like, make us all feel old, Tony.
What? I don't know. Maybe 2005.
Oh my god! Right. So what the hell's going on in 2005 that makes you want to pick up a guitar and Smoke on the Water?
I wasn't good in Little League, and my dad said, if you're not gonna play sports, then you're gonna play an instrument." And then they gave me a guitar and set me up with lessons, and I was lucky enough that when my first teacher asked, like, "Do you want him to learn just how to play, or do you want him to learn how to read?" And my parents said, we want him to learn how to read. So I sat there for, months and years going through scale books and playing pieces. And I didn't go through a lot of classical stuff in the beginning. It was more like learning, pop tunes and Beatles. I had a giant Beatles book growing up that my guitar teacher sat me through.
That's probably why there's so many guitarists. Can you imagine having to learn guitar via these classical tunes that no one can connect with? But at least the Beatles is fun.
But to go back to the classical guitar, I like classical guitar music now. I've developed an appreciation for it, especially listening to Chet Atkins, who is like my other. Brian Setzer and Chet Atkins are probably my 2 favorite guitar players of all time. And I even I've made some arrangements of Beatles tunes and stuff and other songs that are classical based and Chet's kind of style. And
it's amazing. I love that stuff.
I wish that's what they would teach, students in college and stuff. And
how to transpose a song into a different style.
Well, even that, or just maybe. Taking someone's arrangement of a song and just learning that, because when I was at Belmont, I would tell my teacher, like, I want to learn this Chet Atkins arrangement. They'd be like, no, we have to do some Sibelius or whatever, some etude that was written in the 1700s that sounds like you're at some boring dinner party and everyone's getting mercury poisoning from their face makeup.
Are you happy that you did all this classical though? Like, in retrospect, you go, it sucked at the time, but I'm glad I've done it.
I'm glad I did it because it helped me with my finger picking, and and in high school and even now, I'm still I'm a good finger picker, I like to think. And it helps when you're playing guitar for a singer and they want this ballad that could be, could be really boring if you just strummed it, or it could be a little bit more interesting if you finger picked it. I've had that happen where I was playing guitar for this singer-songwriter and we were doing I think it was a Dixie Chicks song. Mm-hmm. And I showed up and, it was a pretty melody, I have to say. I don't judge. And, your guitar's capoed up on the 5th fret or whatever, and you're playing this great finger picking thing. And she just looked at me and she's like, "That's amazing." What? And I got a couple more gigs out of it. So. Oh man.
So I got questions for you now. Like using your mind, and knowing how much you like rockabilly bands. So knowing what you know, and then also your love of rockabilly. When you look at guitarists that played rockabilly, do you see some that have what looks like the knowledge of classical? Can you hear, are there some people that stand, because I'm sure it's in that Buddy Holly biopic, the one that came out in the 80s, where someone goes, "Young man, such a Beethoven did this to Buddy Holly and stuff. These same arrangements you've written," but I don't know.
Yeah, and he's like, "Beethoven did the same thing."
Yeah, that's
although he was very deaf at the time.
Yeah. I can't remember what the song was.
"Raining in My Heart," because they do the bum 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 bum.
"Raining in My Heart," isn't that like a Slim Harpo song? No doubt it is. I'm sure they all borrowed from everything. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, that "Raining in My Heart's probably my favorite Buddy Holly song. Also, it's just such a beautiful song too.
So can you hear this sort of stuff in it's a bit like Elvis's guitarist.
Scotty Moore?
Yeah,
Well, I hear more Chet Atkins than Scotty Moore.
Okay.
Because that's who he was listening to.
Yeah. And kudos to him. I'm still surprised at the time how good he was at what he was doing,
Yeah.
a lot of foresight for that. I mean, it still shocks me that
he must have, I don't know how he would have. Maybe he saw Chet Atkins, or I'm guessing he was listening to WSM when Chet was playing with the Carter Family. Mm-hmm. Hearing this guitar player boom ding with his thumb and playing, chords with his other fingers. I'm guessing he heard that and he was like, "How can I?" Same way Chet probably was when he learned it. So the story
I heard about Scotty was he's working at a dry cleaner in Memphis, and there's a few things that come from this story. But there was an African American guy there that he was learning a lot of stuff from. Mm-hmm. Coincidentally, Tammy Wynette was going to the same dry cleaner, remembers Scotty.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of place, yeah. But yeah, I always think, and this is part, I was going to ask you about this, but I always, with Memphis, and especially the time of B.B. King, he's someone I really like, is that if you go down to Memphis and Beale, there's a park there. Mm-hmm. I forgot what it's called now. It's probably named after, what's his name, the Beale Street Blues guy. But apparently that park would be full of guys trading licks, and in my head I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, so I'm sure a lot more that happened at that time, but you live in Nashville. How much do people trade licks now? Do you trade licks a lot?
Whenever there's a party or something like that, everyone always has their guitars with them. It's just kind of Nashville.
How important is trading licks?
I think it's healthy, definitely. My roommate and I we still do every now and then, just sit with our guitars and be like, "Oh, I learned this lick today," or "I learned this." And whenever you talk to another friend or something like that, if you have your guitar in your hand, it's always good to ask What do you, like, where did you learn that? What's that lick? Show that lick to me. I've learned some great licks just by that's not word of mouth.
Trading leagues,
word of
like
guitar.
trading cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you hear BB King talk about those days, they were just trading leagues.
Yeah, and I believe that's probably. I mean, maybe Scotty was probably looking at some blues musician who played with his thumb.
There's always a teacher.
Yeah.
There's always someone in the back. Like, I've heard the story. Have you heard the story that Jimi Hendrix had a teacher in Nashville who was playing till the 80s or something like that? A jazz
I believe that.
musician.
I know Jimmy lived in Nashville for a little bit.
Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently, that's where he got his chops. Like, living in Nashville.
I believe that for sure.
So, I think you don't live in isolation, right? So, I think there's got to be more of that. It can't just be your ears. There's got to be someone showing you stuff. Like, I'd be impressed if people could just go, "Oh, wow." And then
It's really hard to do. Well, with the invention of YouTube and the internet now, you can a lot of the time you can look up like, oh, solo from Stray Cat Strut, and there'll be 80 videos of competent musicians sitting down and taking you lick through lick, taking it through you with lick through lick and showing you how to play exactly like Setzer plays it on the recording, or how to play the solo to Suzy Q. It's all on the internet. Everything's on the internet now. So I feel like it's probably not the same as it was 70, 80 years ago, where people would go sit in the park with their guitars and be like, what did you learn today?
Maybe that was like an iPhone then. I don't know.
Yeah. Like, that was the social media.
Yeah.
It was
seriously.
But, it's still there in the musician community because...
So, have you found good teachers over the years? Like, how important have teachers been to you?
I loved having teachers growing up because I could, I'd have a list or something every week and bring it in and be like, what is this? What's going on in this? And I had a great teacher growing up who taught me about the classical reading and everything. And then later on, I had a teacher who's a jazz blues guitar player in Orange County. Interestingly enough, he has been playing with Cashed Out recently, which is kind of interesting. But he's a great country player, great blues player. He wrote books for Hal Leonard too, and he taught me so much. Like, he gave me my first lesson in Chet Atkins finger picking, and meanwhile, he wasn't necessarily a Chet player, but he knew what was going on, and he could be like, so this is what he's doing, so you can practice doing this. And he, showed me like the basics of blues and jazz, and I definitely am grateful for, and all my teachers in high school, and I even had some great teachers at Belmont.
You
too.
Leaned into the mic almost like you were about to do a shout out or something.
What up? I could.
But I think that's important to know about teachers. And it's a beautiful thing to have teachers to learn. Like, you can't. You can learn in isolation. You may develop your own voice, but
and if you want to take your playing to the next level, if you've never had a teacher before, maybe think about getting that. I know you take lessons from Ronnie Crutcher in town. Ronnie's a great teacher, and he's got a lot of licks.
His favorite song to play is Flight of the Bumblebee. Talk about classical inspiration. He'd probably kill me or not kill me for saying that. I think he said it on Facebook, so it's all good.
Yeah, I believe it. It's a cool song to play. It's better than Yakety Yaks, right?
Well, music is so... I guess the reason you have a teacher is to kind of sometimes just shine a spot. They can't do the work for you. They can help you to work things out. But ultimately, they just keep your interest up.
Yeah,
and they keep you regular. But they keep you...
They give you the building blocks.
Right.
It is always up to you to do the work, like in anything. You can't pay someone to, make you a master of the guitar. You can pay someone to give you a good start and help you on your journey,
and maybe show you stuff you don't know, like even just introduce you to people and introduce you to their passion for something. I mean, that's half of it, right? What makes you actually get up in the morning and want to do something, like want to play, which is kind of what you need to do. Needs to be something you kind of constantly reach for.
Yeah, I didn't have that passion for a long time, and then I don't know what happened. I think
you discovered girls.
Yeah.
And
Playing
the stage.
guitar has never got me a date. I'll say that much. But no, I think I just
Well, you've
finally
never
got
played
to
a song for a girl, like
No, no. But
not yet.
not
You're working
yet.
on your Hank Garland shiny reflection effect, right?
Yeah, I had a guitar with a big mirrored pick guard on it, and it just kind of annoyed everyone in the audience. I'd be on stage and there'd be a bright spotlight on me, and I would be conscious of it, and I'd like kind of shine it in people's faces, and you just see everyone like, oh God, make it stop. But I forgot what I was saying.
No, it's forgettable.
I guess I was gonna say, like, everyone has a different way of approaching guitar, and that's why it's, even if it's not a teacher, if it's your friend or if it's someone you look up to, ask them what they might play over something or how they might use this scale, and get their opinion on it, because it's probably going to be different from your opinion on it, because everyone plays
right. And some people know scale, like that. If you want to read all the literature, there's just so many ways to attack guitar.
Yeah, and that's why it's one of the most difficult instruments to learn, and that's why most of the people give up on it. And that's what I was saying before.
Like a
was
Rubik's bloody cube.
Yeah, when I started to like practicing and playing the guitar was when I finally got enough time on it to where it was comfortable in my hand and I could actually play a couple things. Then I started to learn stuff that I like to play. So I think everyone just needs to get to that point where they are comfortable enough on the guitar to where if they want to learn a Taylor Swift song or something like that, they can pull up the chords and be like, I know all these chords and I know the song, so I can definitely play the song. Because that's the most, it's like getting the keys to the car, and you can, when you're 16 or whatever, and then you can finally drive down the same street that you used to drive down, but now no one's holding your hand. Mm-hmm. It's you driving the car. Mm-hmm. And it's liberating. For sure. When you can finally look at a piece of music and be like, I can play this note for note and I don't have to learn anything, or I wouldn't have to learn any more than I know now to play this song.
To get away with playing it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be note for note.
Yeah, and then you start to find more songs that you can play, or, you find a song and it's like, oh, what's this chord? Oh, now I'll work on that chord and I'll get that down. Or what's this scale on it? Oh, I know everything except for this part, so I'm going to learn this part. And then, you start to see it in every song that you play.
What about method? Like, did any, like, even Belmont and stuff, did they teach you methods of analyzing songs so that, you could deconstruct it? Was there a method that you've got now, like, like a scientific method or a guitar method to, like, when you take a song apart, you kind of have a method to doing it? Or?
Oh, I mean, that's just kind of music theory, I guess. Like, if you're thinking about... Like if you're looking at a certain jazz song and you're like, what key or keys is this song in? There's ways of looking at it where you can analyze like, oh, that chord is the 2 of that chord and then it goes to the 5 and that's the 1, but then it switches to this different key and then you just, so I guess it's scientific when you're looking at it that way.
Although the truth is most songs aren't written with any of this method in mind.
I wouldn't say they weren't. I mean, a lot of those guys that were writing like the jazz tunes back in the 50s and 60s in the Brill Building were very knowledgeable. Mm-hmm. But I guess if you're looking at people like coming out of Memphis, maybe in Sun Records,
or even Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin,
Beatles, a lot of well, after 1962 or whatever, when there were more garage bands popping up, they didn't know a lot. The Beatles knew a lot, though. I mean, they had. Like George took lessons for a long time.
Really?
Yeah, his aunt or his grandmother, someone.
Oh, that's interesting.
They paid for him to take professional music lessons.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. That I didn't know. I figured he was just listening to records like the rest of people, most people then.
No, yeah, he took lessons.
Because I've heard the bus stories where they get on a bus just to learn a chord from someone if they knew someone knew a chord. That were collecting chords like that,
Yeah, I don't know how long George took lessons, but it's evident in his guitar playing that he was definitely more proficient. Trained. He was trained, I guess. I don't know about... he was probably classically trained. I would have to read more about it.
That's because not just because that's the way they knew to teach. Like in the beauty of guitar now is I go to my teacher and say I want to learn this kind of Frankie Lee Sims song,
Yeah.
I can't find it on YouTube, and then I can go directly to what I want to learn to play rather than learning to play all this stuff that I'm not interested in.
Yeah, so I guess he probably had a better foundation on it. Whereas I don't think John ever really took formal lessons. I know him and Paul used to get together and Paul would show him what he knew. But they played a lot of pop tunes back then too. So they had this foundation of pop music back in the late 50s, early 60s, which was oftentimes kind of complicated. And I imagine that they probably, they, like Paul said, they'd listen to the record at half speed and they, figure out, I'm guessing, and they'd probably sit there like, if it's this chord, but then he goes to this chord. And like the first 3 albums, there's some Broadway songs on there, Till There Was You. That's not an easy song to play.
Well, that's because I think their parents would listen to that stuff, and they'd have those sing-alongs around a piano. So that's kind of how Paul got into all that stuff. So they would be clutching at straws to take everything they could. The only time they would hear like rock and roll music was at like a carnival. The carnivals with the Dodgem cars and stuff like that would come to town, and they'd blare rock and roll out of speak. That's kind of, that their accessibility to the music was so limited. Like to film or to that wasn't being played on radio except for pirate radio. That's how like they heard something, but they really had to work hard to get it, and almost reproducing it and playing it for their friends was as close as they could get to the music.
Yeah, if they knew someone that probably knew a rock and roll tune or whatever, they'd.
Well, that's why they could get away with playing so many covers when the originals were better, right? Because people didn't have access to the originals.
That's very true.
So it
like, what did they have? They had Lonnie Donegan.
Yeah, skiffle and weird stuff like that. Yeah.
But even that was mostly like folk music. It was just like folk music, but with more a higher energy. I guess. Yeah.
It took a long time for the music we like to evolve in the UK, but maybe that meant that it got reinterpreted. They didn't know that there was a double bass.
Yeah.
In the 70s, they still didn't know that it was a double bass on those early Sun records. They thought they would try and reproduce the double bass with a drum. That's how little they knew, how long it took to get to the knowledge. To give you an idea, that's like 20 years or less than 20 years, but still 15 years before just knowing that instrument they're playing, right?
Yeah.
Very different times. So how does that, so then for you, right, you probably know a lot about how things worked before and draw on that, but then you're also of an age with YouTube and all these resources and stuff. Like, how do you feel that's affecting you? Like, what's technology doing to you as a player?
Well, it definitely opens. It's just like Facebook. It opens up the world of, all these different players with different ideas, and I don't just listen to rockabilly or country or all that. I listen to a bunch of different things, and I'm always, my friends are showing me different artists and new songs, and I'm drawing influence from that, I guess, to a certain extent.
Pressure from, what about the opposite from social media? Like the feeling that you need to be on it and doing fun stuff and clever and getting attention. Is there pressure there? Does that feel?
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Is, I'm not one of those guitar players where I post a video every day of a hot lick or something like that. I just don't have the discipline, I guess, to do that. I could sit down and play a lick a day, or show you something on my Instagram every day or my Facebook, but I'd rather just use that stuff to see what other people are doing, I guess, and every now and then promote a show or two, or if I find a funny video or something. You don't feel the pressure from it at this point. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on guitar players these days to, I guess, post a lot of videos. And I'm not saying I don't post videos, but I'm not religious about it like some people are.
So in Nashville, you can get by with word of mouth and people seeing you at shows still.
I don't know. I guess you can. If there's ever a good musician, I like to pass the word on to people. Like, if you ever need a drummer, this guy is really good. If you ever need a guitar player, try this. So it's, I think if you're good and you do the work, then people will recognize it, and then they'll start, your name will start to be mentioned and be brought up. I know that I'm glad that every now and then I get a message from someone saying, "Hey, I recommended you for this gig because I feel like you'd be a good fit for it." Someone, I hope they reach out to you. And I'm like, that's nice that someone was thinking that I'd be good for this gig. And I've gotten some interesting work from that before. One time I was actually pretty recently, I was in a pop bro country music video.
Of course you were.
Yeah, I was playing bass in it. Just randomly.
Anything for money.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
So.
And how do you feel it's going? How do you how do you measure time? Like when imagine I have to like think back to being that young, like how would you measure time? Like how do you measure time in terms of success, what you've done? Do you do you put pressure on yourself? How's that?
I feel like I put pressure on myself, but I mean, it's I guess it's how you deal with it. I've done a lot in the almost 4 years I've been here, I guess.
Ain't it crazy how quick it goes?
Yeah, and that's all. What do they say? Like Nashville's a 5-year town if you don't make it in 5 years or something. I've heard that from a couple people.
Man, it's a bit like 145. Like there's all these formulas, like musicians like formulas, but
yeah.
I think Squire mentioned to me yesterday that it takes 5 years for people to start booking you regularly. Like it actually takes that long for you to fall into more shows and gigs and stuff. So I've heard the opposite. Like it's not like 5 years you make it or you're out. I've also heard it takes 5 years just to
get your name out there.
Yeah.
Well, I guess then I'd say it's been pretty good. This past year especially has been really great. I've been playing in a couple bands that have had some steady work, and this it always gets busy this time of year. I feel like too, even when I wasn't playing every week around this time of year. November, December, I always get a little bit more work just because of the tourist season and all the holidays.
Yeah. And people take you under your wing. You're always popping up on stage for different people and stuff.
I'm always very grateful that, Hillbilly Casino get me up to play some songs, the Royal Hounds.
Big Sandy, no?
Yeah, I've gotten up with him.
Chuck Mead?
No, not yet.
Okay. It was just Mark Miller. I think I saw you up there once, or maybe they popped into one of your shows.
I've played with Mark Miller once at the Nashville Palace, and Chuck actually was there and got up and played my guitar for a song, so I didn't get to play with him.
No, but all this is going to make you more confident.
I'm very grateful, and I actually got one of my. I play with Lydia Brittan every Saturday, and I got that gig because if you remember Elvis Cantu, he used to live here, and now he lives in California. He got me up because Scott Hines was playing bass for him and said like, "Oh, this guy's a good guitar player. Let's get him up for a couple songs." And Elvis got me up, and then that's a long story too. But I was supposed to see Wanda Jackson that night, and they got me up, and like I played 2 songs, and then I was like, I'm gonna be late for the Doors, so I gotta get out of here. And I gave Elvis his guitar back, and I ran off stage and ran out the door. And then Lydia came up and grabbed me. She's like, "Wait, you have to play guitar for me. You have to be in my band." And that was like 2.5 years.
As you're rushing to see a 50s rockabilly.
As I'm rushing to see
a normal night in Nashville, da 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 da.
Yeah, well. The sad ending to that is I didn't get to see Wanda that night because the doors closed before I got there.
Oh.
Yeah, but I did get to see her.
I've seen you see her, so I know that.
I did get to see her finally.
You stood up front and you were writing notes.
Yes, and there were a bunch of short people behind me, and I didn't care because Wanda was winking at me the whole night.
Imparting her, because you're like carrying her legacy on. She lives through you. Everyone lives through you, Tony. They all we're all banking on you to keep this.
Don't give me that pressure.
Because in a few years' time you're gonna evolve to some different style. You'll be like doing I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting
jazz or something.
That's another conversation too. I've noticed a lot of people in the rockabilly world and rockabilly genre have been developing like this '60s soul sound now. It's kind of become like the new the new thing to do, I feel like.
Doesn't that feel normal though? Like if you think we talked about Stack, so a lot of those guys would have been around in the 50s, and then they kind of evolved and changed and did different things.
If they didn't go to country, maybe, yeah.
Right. I kind of feel it's kind of weird when people get like, I mean, if you're into I think about this, you're into the 50s, like how can you not then evolve into the 60s?
I know that's the funny thing.
Sense,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I love the 60s stuff. Gosh,
Oh,
dang.
yeah.
Like,
There's so much good stuff.
and even before the 50s, there's amazing stuff. You know.
Yeah,
like,
very true. All that
so
swing and jazz and bebop and blues and country.
Mississippi, you know, like
Mhm.
so it's one of those things. You're constantly learning new things.
Yeah, and everyone's evolving always.
Right.
I hope as musicians, everyone's evolving, because if you don't evolve, then it's like you're just gonna get up on stage and play your greatest hits every night, like the Rolling Stones or something.
Who themselves took blues,
right?
and applied blues, and then evolved into something very different, but that still heavily references the blues.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what we do. That's what humans and artists do, I suppose. So.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see that, like, all these Stax artists and King and all the blues artists and R&B artists from the 60s are gonna start to get honored more and more. And I've played in a bunch of bands. I do it with Lydia. I've played with my friend out in California, Abby Girl and the Real Deal. She does a lot of soul and 50s and 60s soul stuff. Irma Thomas. And we have a lot of fun with it. And I like playing that stuff too. The guitar is always very interesting.
So who knows where the future lies for you?
I guess so. It's all a matter of whatever fork in the road I take. I don't know.
Thanks, Joni.
Thank you. With no thumb pick.
Like they do it in concert.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can I ask you something? Have you ever I feel like sometimes I when I'm finger picking, I play it so hard lately that I'm almost trying to cut myself, and I'm like, damn.
That's how you get the calluses. You ever see those old footage of the blues guys' fingers, and they're just like, it's like that was a hand that did some work.
Do people cut themselves?
Yeah. Hey, can you imagine, even Robert Johnson probably back in the day didn't play with a pick. Like all those guys, they'd be at a juke joint just playing to 30 people just. Trying to make this acoustic guitar project to 30 people without a microphone, That they probably cut themselves until they didn't one day.
Thanks for listening to the Bring It On Home podcast. For suggestions or questions, email us at diamondjive@gmail.com.